So let's look at one larger dynamic, and this goes back several more centuries. Think about the Enlightenment. So on one hand, the Enlightenment had to do with scientific rationalism. There's a pursuit of universals, and not only can something be true locally, but we're looking for math that works at any geography. We're looking at science that should work in any geography. So there was this pursuit of scientific rationalism, that we can do this without God, that we can discover truths, and those truths apply everywhere. Universals, and we're after certainty. One of the driving forces of the Enlightenment was, what can we know for sure? What can we depend upon? And remember that this increasingly was happening when God was not one who could be understood or depended upon, or even was a player in experience. So this pursuit of certainty became a driving force of the Enlightenment. How can we develop ways of thinking, rationalism, ways of discovery, empiricism, that we really believe are absolutely certain and absolutely dependable no matter where or when you are? Other elements of the Enlightenment had to do with autonomy, how we can do all of this. The big bargain of the Enlightenment is, how can we live life without God? We can pull back from that authority. Fragmentation means that you understand, this comes from scientific rationalism, that you understand something the best if you pull it apart and understand its pieces. And so the human body isn't best understood as a whole. The human body is best understood if you understand a joint, um, a working of a molecule now, a disease, a particular aspect of the human body. So the more you pull it apart, the same with an organization, that as you fragment an organization and understand each part, then you'll be able to control it, to make it do what you want it to do. That's that next point, that after fragmentation is control. It's by controlling the parts that we understand how we can make something happen. There's also a constant confidence in the enlightenment of progress, that things are just going to continually get better. So that those particular elements, and you can study, and you probably have your own list of things that come out of the Enlightenment. As the Enlightenment peaked, then there was what we often refer to as Romanticism. And this, in some ways, was a response to a dehumanizing sense of the Enlightenment. So the Romanticism, its novels, its paintings, emphasized more the sensual, the physical. It emphasized nature. Also, instead of a concern about universals, there was a pullback to focus more on the local. What's going on here, what's going on in specific concrete stories. So this is the great age of the development of novels, narratives, feelings, the affectivity of life. So these other elements that seem to be left out by scientific rationalism and autonomy and fragmentation and control, that Romanticism placed these other elements back into human experience, human conversation. And so modernity is Enlightenment plus Romanticism. And that's what leads us to where we end up now. Think about how, as I illustrate here, particular ways that comes out in consumerism, marketing, our understandings of community, our understanding of status. So consumerism plays off of affectivity, of Romanticism, human preferences. How do we help? How do we cause people to want to desire certain things? This goes with Jamie Smith's points about how do we form desires. And this is what marketing is about. How do we form desires in a group of people to want things and to sacrifice for those things? I also got into this in my article on the gospel last week. And so marketing has to do with consumer preference, and how do you not just fulfill, but how do you actually create preferences? And community then, this was very much a boomer issue, my generation, in the 60s, that we used the word community to talk about somebody who I just met that I kind of like, and we have some shared preferences. So in a dorm room, in a college campus, or at the local pub, we would talk about deep friendships, community, if we like each other, and if we like some of the same things. It's an incredibly thin definition of community if you look at across history of human life, and even priorities of the Gospels, priorities of Scripture. Just being with a handful of people that you kind of like and you kind of like the same things just doesn't give you much traction or trust or dependability or loyalty or allegiance. All these things that make human community sacrifice over a period of time. Status is also then something that we market. We try to get into somebody else's preferences so that we gain the status, so that we both have affective impact beyond ourselves, but also the whole purpose, as I said, that many people think what leadership is about. Leadership is about controlling others. It's about getting others to do what you want them to do. And so status is one of the elements in that whole approach to leadership. Scientific management theory, then, is how a lot of the scientific rationalism comes to play in management theory, why you'd even talk about science of management. Strategic planning has to do with fragmentation. How do we look at all the parts? And then how do we control all those parts to make happen what we want to have happen? You can't do strategic planning without treating people like objects. By its very nature, human activity, human behaviors are simply commodities, simply pieces, fragments of the overall scheme. So structures and control then are part of that. So think about how this then impacts the church. The churches frequently then create and market goods and services for members and other consumers. So we create groups, we create preaching, performance, music, particular activities in a church. All of these are commodities that we want to attract others. They're commodities that we want to market, either inside the church or to those outside the church. And so remember, back on our social theory of societies, cultures, and communities, that societies colonize culture. So these movements in society at large, of Enlightenment and Romanticism and modernity and late modernity, those will colonize culture, and both societies and cultures colonize communities. And so the church is then constantly shaped in these different social forces. One of the videos you'll be watching this week is Contemporary. And so look at how these particular trajectories in culture and society show up in that particular video. George Ritzer wrote a book called McDonaldization. You'll see this then reflects what we've been talking about. McDonaldization, that is the process by which the principles of the fast food restaurant are coming to dominate more and more sectors of the American society, as well as the rest of the world. And he notes 4: efficiency, predictability, calculability, and the appearance of control. And how these then become part of everything from church management to church starts, many other elements of parachurch organizations. How can we do something more efficiently? So let's fragment the market. Let's just work with this age group. Let's just work with this niche. So we can be more efficient because we can really get down to how to cause the effects that we want to in that. Predictability. We want to create predictable people so that they'll fit our programs, and then we'll be able to have whatever it is we want: bigger numbers, powerful experiences, those things. Calculability, by inserting, switching, whether it's the way songs are arranged or the way particular programs are carried out. And again, the idea is control towards some goals. So be imagining how McDonaldization is present in the church experiences.